Imagine standing in front of one of the sharpest minds in television history, a woman whose wit and intelligence have humbled even the most confident. Now, imagine looking Judge Judy right in the eye and daring to insult her intelligence. Friends, what you're about to hear is not just courtroom drama. It's a story of arrogance colliding with truth. And when it happened, the entire courtroom froze. A woman, who many now call a Karen, thought she could outsmart Judge Judy, but 47 seconds later, she was speechless. Why did she do it? What drove her to attack the intelligence of someone who has seen thousands of cases and has a razor-sharp instinct for lies? And how did Judy, who has made a career out of cutting through arrogance like a hot knife through butter, respond in a way that left the entire courtroom reeling? Stay with me, because this isn't just about a petty insult. It's about what happens when pride meets reality. It began like so many other cases in Judy's courtroom. The bright lights, the camera capturing every nervous twitch, and Judge Judy sitting high above, ready to dissect the truth. The plaintiff sat on one side, calm, collected, clearly convinced that justice was on their side. And on the other, the defendant, a woman with fire in her eyes, arms crossed tightly, the kind of defiance that makes you wonder, what is she hiding? But before the first question was even finished, this defendant, this self-styled Karen, did something few would ever dream of. She smirked at Judge Judy. And not the nervous kind of smirk you see when someone's scared, no. This was the smirk of someone who believed she was smarter than everyone else in the room. Have you ever seen someone so certain they could twist the truth, so sure they could bend reality in their favor? That's exactly what we saw here. And it all came crashing down when she opened her mouth. She didn't just argue her case, she attacked Judy herself. With a cold laugh, she threw out words that stunned the audience. Well, maybe you don't understand, Judge. Think about that for a moment. Saying those words to a woman who has spent decades sharpening her mind in the courtroom. Saying those words to a woman who has already proven she can spot deception before most people even know it exists. Friends, it was the verbal equivalent of walking into a lion's den and poking the beast. Judge Judy leaned forward. The room grew tense. You could feel the weight in the air. People shifted in their seats. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Judy's eyes narrowed, as if she were studying not just the words, but the soul behind them. "Did you just insult my intelligence?" she asked, her voice cutting through the silence like glass shattering on a marble floor. The defendant didn't back down. She doubled down, shaking her head and rolling her eyes, as if Judy was the one wasting her time. And that's when it began, the unraveling. Because Judy, with decades of courtroom mastery, did not respond with anger. She responded with precision. She asked one question, just one. And within seconds, the arrogance began to crumble. The defendant tripped over her own words. She contradicted herself. She paused too long. The smirk vanished. 47 seconds. That's all it took for Judge Judy to dismantle every shred of confidence this woman carried into that room. And the audience? They couldn't believe their eyes. One moment, the defendant was sneering, practically daring Judy to call her out. The next, she was stammering, searching desperately for words that no longer came. Her armor of arrogance had shattered in front of millions. But here's the deeper question. Why was she so desperate to insult Judy in the first place? What pushed her to that edge? Was it fear? Was it pride? Or was it something darker? A belief that by attacking intelligence itself, she could distract from the truth. Friends, think about your own life for a moment. How often do we see people like this? People so unwilling to admit fault that they'd rather tear down others than face reality. Isn't it heartbreaking and frustrating? And yet this moment wasn't just about humiliation. It was about revelation. Because when Judy began peeling back the layers, we saw the truth hidden underneath the arrogance. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about respect.
The defendant had disrespected not just Judge Judy, but everyone in the room. And Judy wasn't about to let that slide. Her voice grew firmer, sharper, each word like a hammer striking steel. You don't get to come into this courtroom and tell me what I don't understand. What I understand, better than you, is the truth. The power of those words lingered. You could almost see the defendant shrinking in her seat. She had walked in trying to command the room, but now the room commanded her. And here's where it became truly emotional, because the plaintiff, the one who had been quiet, who had sat watching the arrogance play out, began to cry. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. They knew in that moment that justice was on their side, that someone had finally stood up against the manipulation, the gaslighting, the insults. It was more than just a courtroom win. It was a victory for every person who has ever been belittled, every person who has ever been told they were less smart, every person who has been insulted simply to protect another's ego. Friends, have you ever had someone try to insult your intelligence? Someone who tried to make you feel small so they could feel big? If so, you know the sting, and you know how powerful it is when someone finally calls it out. Judge Judy didn't just defend herself that day, she defended every person who's ever been disrespected. That's why this case lives on, shared across millions of screens, remembered as the day arrogance was silenced in under a minute. But what happened after? That's the question everyone wanted to know. Did the defendant apologize? Did she finally accept the truth? Or did she continue to fight, blind to the reality crumbling around her? The answer is complicated, because while Judy's words had left her speechless, pride is not so easily destroyed. There were still tears, still excuses, still attempts to twist the narrative, but every attempt fell flat. Judy had already exposed the truth, and once truth is out, it can't be taken back. And in her final ruling, Judge Judy delivered not just a verdict, but a lesson about humility, respect, and the cost of arrogance. With her gavel in hand, she declared the decision. Justice was served. The plaintiff's relief turned into a smile. The defendant's pride into silence. And friends, isn't that what we all hope for? That arrogance will one day meet its match. That truth will stand tall when lies fall apart. That justice, real, unshakable justice, will prevail. This story is more than courtroom entertainment. It's a mirror to our own lives, because every single one of us has faced or will face people who underestimate us, insult us, or try to tear us down. And in those moments, we can remember this: arrogance lasts seconds, but truth lasts forever. So, let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in Judge Judy's place? Would you have stayed calm? Would you have struck back with equal force? Or would you, like Judy, have let the truth do the work for you? Tell us in the comments. I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if this story reminded you of a moment where you or someone you love finally stood tall against arrogance, share it. Share this video with friends, because sometimes all it takes is one story to remind us of the power of truth. But friends, don't go far, because in our next story, another courtroom clash left even Judge Judy herself in tears. Yes, you heard that right. Judge Judy crying in her own courtroom. What kind of story could break through the armor of one of the toughest television judges on television? Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss it. But friends, before we dive into what came next, let's pause for just a moment and look closer at the woman who thought she could outsmart Judge Judy. Who was she really? What was her story? Because arrogance like that doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows from somewhere. From the very first second she stepped into the courtroom, her body language told the story. Shoulders squared like a soldier marching into battle, lips tight with the kind of forced confidence that's built more on pride than truth. She adjusted her jacket 3 times in less than a minute, but not out of nervousness, out of control. It was as though every movement said, "I am in charge here." But what she failed to realize was that in Judge Judy's courtroom, there is only one person in charge, and it isn't the defendant. Friends, have you ever met someone who mistakes confidence for arrogance? Someone who thinks speaking louder makes them smarter? That was her. And as Judy began asking questions, her tone grew sharper, her voice colder. She wasn't just answering questions, she was throwing daggers. The plaintiff, meanwhile, sat quietly, their eyes lowered at first, then gradually lifting with every arrogant word the defendant spewed. Because when someone shows the world their true self, all you have to do is wait. The mask always slips. And oh, how quickly it slipped here. Judy started with simple questions, names, dates, basic facts, but each answer carried